What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for turning Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Stephen Thompson. I'm here with another Inside Pitt practice report coming to you from the south side of Pittsburgh after speaking with head coach Pat Narduzzi on this, the first day of the first game week of 2023. It's an exciting day. It seems like folks appreciated these Inside Pitt practice reports following training camp practices, so I decided to keep them up through the regular season. The way media schedule works at Pitt, I'll be there Monday through Thursday, excuse me, usually with a day off on Friday. So that's usually when you can expect these videos to come out. Try to get them out later in the afternoon after I get home. And after we get to talk to some of these guys. So be on the lookout for these. Make sure to stick with this channel all the way through the season. I'll have some game reports as well, maybe some pregame stuff, definitely some postgame stuff from Acrisure Stadium every time we head out there. So I hope you'll stick with us throughout the regular season, and I hope you enjoy these videos. But like I said, it was a big day on the south at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. The Panthers have officially set their sights on Wofford. And while the start of the regular season is a hopeful time, there was some bad news that I think we need to start with. So we'll start there. Offensive lineman Ryan Jacoby is out for the season. Pat Narduzzi teased this a little bit last week, but he made it official today with the announcement that Jacoby had suffered a non-contact injury somewhere around this second week of training camp, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if not the third, but midway through training camp, non-contact injury, like I said. So he will be out for the rest of the year. This is, first of all, a huge bummer for Ryan. Of course, a fifth-year senior, a guy who looked like he was in position to earn a starting job this year. A guy who could have really helped the Panthers and been a big part of what the offensive line looks like this year, and instead he sees it all kind of fall apart in an instant in a position where, you kind of never expect something like that to happen. But, you certainly never expect a major injury to happen when you're not, hitting guys and when you're not going live. So I'm sure that was tough for him and tough for everybody else, his teammates to see. But that's just how it happens sometimes. And Narduzzi said they might look into a medical hardship waiver that allows him to come back for another year of eligibility, but they won't worry about that until the end of the season. So if you're looking for any kind of positive spin on it, it's that, there is still a possibility that Jacoby comes back to Pitt, plays one more season, and that'd be good to have him back next year for an offensive line that will get a little bit younger again and could use some experience there. So that's the positive spin. It is still sad, and it still sucks for Jacoby and sucks for the team as well, because there are some very tangible impacts to this team that kind of ripple out from his injury, and we'll get into those in a minute because, like I said, it was a big day, not just because of that injury, but because the first depth chart of the season came out for the Panthers. We learned a little bit and got some stuff confirmed that we might have known if you've been keeping up with my reporting from InsideThePanthers.com, as I've been at training camp almost every day. I took a stab at predicting what the two deep would look like, and I got a decent chunk of it right. Some positions were switched around a little bit, but I got 24 of 49 total spots dead on. Got the right guy in there, including a lot of the starting spots. So that was a first offense, a second offense, a first defense, second defense, and then 5 special teams positions. I got 7 of those at least partially right, because there was maybe a co-starter or a backup role going on that I didn't nail down, and then I got 17 spots outwardly wrong just because some stuff shifted around at offensive and offensive line and linebacker. Like I said, we didn't know the Jacoby news until later, so I had him kind of penciled in there as a starter, but doesn't look like that'll be the case here anymore. But we'll run through these all real quick with you, just kind of who fell out where, what do we know, and where some more of these interesting position battles and what were the results of those. We'll start up top with the quarterbacks. Obviously, Phil Jurkovec, your QB1 for this season. That's been confirmed by Pat Narduzzi multiple times, going back to spring ball when Jurkovec had barely been here for a couple weeks. But further down the depth chart, Christian Veillere beats out Nate Yarnell for the QB2 job. Sounds like this was a little bit more of a later development, with Veillere demonstrating some more consistency down the stretch. Reading between the lines, it sounds like Nate Yarnell had some mistakes in the second scrimmage. In the second, I guess you could call that the final scrimmage. They didn't really have a real live scrimmage for the rest of the summer after that one. But it sounds like Yarnell made some mistakes in that scrimmage that really proved to make the difference. And, Veillere not making those mistakes, not committing some turnovers is really what allowed him to get that quarterback 2 job. Elsewhere on the offense, a lot of your starting skill positions are locked in. All your starting skill positions are locked in. Rodney Hammond, Bub Means, Kanata Mumfield, Gavin Bartholomew. You know those names. Those guys were pretty obvious. Those were some layups. But, thinking about guys we maybe didn't expect, Dejon Reynolds is another starter at wide receiver. He's that third starting wide receiver. I would say he's the only one who's really somewhat of a surprise, if you want to call it a surprise at all. I had him penciled in as that third starting wide receiver. I think earlier, and before camp started, I had one of those freshmen figuring in as one of the guys there. I believe I had Lamar Seymour penciled in there. But it turns out, Reynolds, they like his experience, they like his physicality, and they like how much he knows the offense too. And I think that was a big thing for Pat Narduzzi. Kenny Johnson and Zion Fowler-El, couple of freshmen, are backups alongside, Jake McConaughey, who was actually just put on scholarship last week. But it sounds like, the real difference was knowing the playbook and knowing what you're doing on every play. And, it's understandable that guys like Johnson and Fowler-El, maybe don't know the playbook as well. Those are guys that are talented, but they were summer enrollees, so they have not been around this team and around this playbook for very long. So they probably still have some growing to do in that department. At running back, further down the depth chart behind Hammond, Saborius Flemister and Daniel Carter are co-backups at running back. That's not something that I would have predicted. I had Flemister as the lone backup. And then, if anything, Carter and Derek Davis as maybe co-third stringers. But for right now, you got four running backs listed on the total depth chart, going all the way down to Derek Davis, who's a third stringer technically, but Sebo and Carter, those are your two backups at running back. We'll see how that shakes out. It sounds like it'll be a lot of running back committee. I still expect Hammond to take the bulk of the carries, but you can expect a more even split down the rest of the depth chart. I think elsewhere there's an interesting backup situation going on at tight end. Carter Johnson, Malcolm Epps, and Jake Renda are all co-backups at tight end. I wrote a little bit about them last week. The Panthers kind of putting their money where their mouth is. They mentioned all of those guys as really capable players and guys that they're excited about, and they put them all in the depth chart, and we might end up seeing all of them play in some important snaps this year. Offensive line, this one was a little bit of a mess for me. I think I got Jake Cradle at center, and his backup, Terrence Moore. I got those right. The other 8 remaining spots on the 2 deep, I got wrong. I got a lot of the names right. I'll read you them off. Going right to left, you got Taylor at right tackle, Zubovic right guard, Jake Cradle center, Jason Collier Jr. your left guard, and Matt Goncalves is your left tackle. Your tackles switch sides from where they played for most of last season. That's why I had Goncalves at right tackle and Taylor at left tackle, but those guys are going to flip. It's pretty simple. Matt Goncalves is the Panthers' best lineman this year, and so they're going to stick him at left tackle. That's where your best lineman should probably be if you are a team with a right-handed quarterback, which Phil Dracovic is. Taylor kind of seemed to dip a little bit during camp, but has risen back up, especially with Jacoby out, a little bit thinner competition, but he emerges as a starter at tackle. Zubovic was an easy one. Cradle was also an easy one. Jason Collier comes out of nowhere a little bit. He's helped by the fact that Jacoby goes down, but Pat Narduzzi says this isn't just, about attrition. Collier has earned that spot. He has played really good football as of late. So it's not just a matter of, we need a body to fill that spot. Pat Narduzzi really believes that he is capable and that he deserves that spot as well. What I think is really interesting on the offensive line was Ryan Baer being listed as a backup guard. He was really hyped up all of camp. If you've been watching these videos and following along, he's one of the more talented offensive linemen that they have. A little younger as a redshirt freshman, but he was someone that I expect to be able to jump into a starting spot immediately. I was a little surprised to see him listed as just a backup. I'm not sure how long this one lasts. Collier, I believe Pat Narduzzi at his word when he says that Collier has earned this spot, but I think that also has to do with experience. I think Collier is a redshirt senior, if not a 6th-year senior. So Baer being a redshirt freshman was kind of fighting an uphill battle when you think about it that way. But I have a sneaking suspicion that Bears' talent is really going to stand out once they get him into a set position. This is a guy who's been playing both guard spots and both tackle spots, but they can get him into somewhere settled, especially at a guard position. I think he's someone that really over could overtake Collier eventually as the season goes on. And Pat Narduzzi said they'll keep working him at both guard and tackle. I assume just to keep their fifth lineman, and that's what I think Brian Bear is right now. I think he's their fifth best, or excuse me, sixth best offensive lineman with obviously Cradle at center. But I see that as just them just trying to keep him ready for anything because they are suddenly thinner and lost some versatility along the offensive line. But I think, all things being equal, Bear, once he gets into a set position, is going to be able to let his talent really shine. And he, I couldn't put an exact number on it for you, but I'd say around the start of ACC play, we can start to think about, okay, maybe Ryan Bear is ready for this. Maybe he's got enough of these plays under his belt. Maybe he can slide into that right tackle or that right guard spot, excuse me, and they can keep him, or excuse me, that left guard spot, and they can keep him in that starting lineup and get their most talented five guys out there. Moving along to the defensive side of the ball, there are some easy ones here. Dayon Hayes and Nate Temple are your starting defensive ends. That one seemed to be pretty set in stone from midway through camp, and as long as Nate Temple stayed healthy, he was going to get that job. Dayon Hayes, obviously, one of the more talented guys on this defensive line, so he takes that spot over. Shane Simon is the starter at Mike with Brandon George as his backup. That's Mike linebacker. And MJ Devonshire, AJ Woods, Marquez Williams are your three starters at corner. Rylan Gandy is your lone backup. I got all those. Those were ones that you could kind of see coming. The corners were layups, so were the linebackers, and the ends. Maybe you saw a little bit of something different with Nikai Johnson over Nate Temple, but Temple wins that one out. I think also just really based on experience as well. Johnson is a backup, but just maybe not all the way there yet. Probably might still rotate in a lot, but just not quite yet ready for starter reps. I think moving to the corners, there is something a little interesting going on there. There's a distinction between Devonshire, Woods, and Williams. Devonshire is a starter all his own on one side of the field at one corner position, while Woods and Williams are listed as co-starters without a backup. Gandy is Devonshire's backup. It's a little interesting. It's a real public declaration that MJ is their best corner, which I think is really interesting. It's not, you kind of just see those three corners as a monolith most of the time, as them as the three corners, the three starting corners. But there is clearly a distinction between Devonshire, who I think was generally considered the best corner on the team, and then Woods and Williams, who were kind of starter capable, but just maybe not on that level yet. And this is really the first time I think I can remember, Pat Narduzzi and the program and the coaching staff putting it in writing that Devonshire is our guy. He's our shutdown guy. We're gonna really count on him to be the best guy on the field every time. So thought that was interesting as well. Javon McIntyre and PJ O'Brien are your starting safeties. Didn't think that was much of a surprise at all. It seemed to be trending that way during training camp. Little interesting along the defensive line, Devin Danielson and David Green, who I had as your two starters at defensive tackle. They share a starting spot. So do DeAndre Jules and Tyler Bentley. So you just basically have four starters along the defensive line that I assume they'll rotate in kind of intermittently and based on matchups, preferences, whatever, health, obviously, and then, just timing throughout the game, who needs rest, who doesn't. I assume they'll rotate those guys in. That's something Charlie Partridge likes to do. Expect to see a bunch of Elliot Donald, who rises up to a backup defensive tackle spot. And then Sean Fitzsimmons, I didn't think that one was much of a surprise. He's a backup defensive tackle as well. At the outside linebacker spots, I think those are interesting as well. We hear a lot about cross-training within the linebacker group, but Bengali Kamara and Solomon DeShields are actually switching outside linebacker spots. Kamara played star last year. DeShields was also a star, but he was his backup. DeShields stays at the star position, and Kamara moves over to money. This was an interesting one, not one I saw coming. They both play outside, but I predicted that they'd be on opposite sides of the field, just, not in those positions. I kind of had them flipped. I had DeShields sliding into that money spot with Kamara hanging on to his star spot that he started at last year and I thought did pretty well at. But Narduzzi said, this isn't a huge deal. They're both, very capable players, and this he just felt that Kamara was a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, and better suited to play in the box and blitz, which you can do better from that money spot versus that star spot where you got to play in space a little bit more. So it seems like he like shields his, I wouldn't necessarily call it athleticism, but he's a little lighter, possibly a little faster. While Kamara really gets downhill and uses his power. If you've ever seen Kamara in person, he's a big dude. He looks like an NFL ready linebacker already. So it seems like he likes him more as a, kind of downhill linebacker, a blitzer, versus the Shields, who we think can maybe play in space a little bit better. That's really that's really all we got from the two deep. That's most of what we got from this first day of pit practice. We're all still just kind of getting our feet wet into the regular season. I'll be back with another inside pit practice report. Thank you all for tuning into this one. I'll be back tomorrow with another report after we attend our second day. We get to watch a little bit of practice tomorrow, talk to some players and coaches. So I'll have more for you guys on this channel tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in to another inside pit practice report. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/inside the Panthers, and read all our reporting from the regular season and from practices, and then of course from games as well at insidethepanthers.com. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.